My name is Anthony Graham. I'm Anna Graham's father. I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I left South Africa in 1979.
Okay, so the first question we're going to ask you is, when living in South Africa, did you trust the government?
No. But what do you mean? In what way? Did I trust them?
Did you trust your own government?
No, the government was, well, first of all, it was an apartheid government, so it was a totalitarian regime, and you didn't have rights, and you were not allowed to speak up, and there was no freedom, so definitely that led to distrust.
Government more now, or did you trust the government more when you were growing up as a young boy?
Living in America, do I trust the American government
More than when you were growing up?
Well, it depends. The American system of politics is very different to South Africa when I grew up in South Africa. In America, the government changes, even though it's not fundamentally, it does changes between one party and the other. So, depending on who is running the country and what the administration is doing, will have an influence on my level of trust. But overall, I think that the United States government is reasonably trustworthy.
Compared to South Africa?
Very trustworthy compared to South Africa.
Do South African values coincide with democratic values?
Well, if you're comparing today's South African values with today's American values, there are similarities and there's some very, very big differences. What's similar is that they're both democracies. So if that is a value, there's definitely a similarity. However, the South African government there's a Communist Party in South Africa, there's many other political parties or political ideals that exist in South Africa that couldn't exist in the United States today. So from that standpoint, their values are different. My identity with South Africa is purely, I grew up in South Africa during the apartheid years, and there is no longer an apartheid regime in South Africa. So my values with my identity with South Africa is more about growing up in a neighborhood with friends, and it was my home. It's what was familiar to me as a young boy growing up, and then I identify with the weather, with Africa in general, because I identify with living around a lot of black people, because I was a minority. So everywhere you went in South Africa growing up there were black people. So certainly there's a strong identity to that and to Africa as a whole. And well, there was a lot of corruption in South Africa growing up there, and there is corruption today. I don't think the corruption doesn't really have any racial boundaries or any political boundaries at all. I mean, it's just that, you know.
But did you experience any corruption firsthand?
Yeah, there were bribes. I experienced more anti-Semitism and discrimination against religions and color than I did really experience corruption.
And then why did you leave South Africa?
Wow. Yeah, I left South Africa. I left South Africa. Was enlisted. It was compulsory and mandatory to go into the military, and South Africa had a destabilization program against Angola and Mozambique, which was supported by the United States government, and it was really an anti-communist destabilization program, because the Cubans were in Angola. So I was enlisted to go into the army and fight in Angola, and I went twice, and I decided that I didn't believe in it and I didn't want to have anything to do with it, so I left. And Jenny, my wife at the time, we decided we were going to go, and we went to live in London.
And what year was that?
That was 1979.
Okay. And then I know you visited South Africa recently, so
No.
pretty recently.
Last
And
year
do you
in
think
June.
that the level of distress between black and whites is improving?
The level of?
Distress between like their relationship. Do you think it's improving, or do you think it's still?
From what I've read and what I've heard, and from speaking to people in Johannesburg where I was, it had. I mean, it's improved because the majority of the people now run the country and they're free to lead. You know, to live are blacks, are Africans, yeah, and black Africans, and they are free to move and do what as they please, as when they please. So from that aspect, I think there's a large improvement.
Okay.
But there's still violent crime, a lot of violent crime, and it's not necessarily black on white. It's just violent crime.
Okay. And then our last question is, do you think that the current government is still fair or biased in some way of South Africa, the South African government?
I think that there is some reverse discrimination to some extent, but I think that Nelson Mandela has a huge part to play in it being very difficult for leadership in South Africa to discriminate reversely. I think just the dynamics of who he is and what he, and what he stands for and why he's alive. I don't think it's really not significant.
So you think that the government is still biased in ways?
No, I don't think they're as biased. They're certainly not nearly as biased as what the white regime, apartheid regime was, because there were laws against black people. The government today, which is a black government, the ANC, don't have laws against white people. There's no discrimination against white people. Black and white
so
people.
So they're more fair today?
Way more. It's a true democracy today, whereas it never used to be. Under the white government, it was not a true democracy. It was a fascist regime.
All right. Well, thank you for talking to us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And that's it. It's a wrap.